I never imagined that putting up a campaign sign in my own front yard would lead to threats, legal battles, and a showdown with the most vindictive HOA president I'd ever encountered. My name is Xavier, and I'd lived in the Meadowbrook Estates development in Scottsdale, Arizona, for about 3 years when everything went sideways. I'm a software engineer working remotely for a tech company in California, and I bought my house here because the neighborhood seemed quiet, the community well-maintained, and honestly, the price was right. The HOA seemed like a minor inconvenience at worst, just another monthly fee to keep the common areas looking decent. It was early September, and the political season was heating up. I'd never been particularly vocal about my political leanings, but this election cycle felt different. There was a local congressional race that actually mattered to me because one of the candidates had a strong stance on tech privacy issues that directly affected my industry. So, I ordered a simple yard sign, nothing inflammatory, just the candidate's name and the office they were running for. The sign arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. It was standard size, about 18 by 24 inches, with blue lettering on a white background. I stuck it in the ground near my mailbox, maybe 15 feet from the street, right next to my desert landscaping with the saguaro cactus I'd spent a small fortune maintaining. The whole process took maybe 5 minutes, and I didn't think twice about it. By Thursday morning, I had a letter in my mailbox. Not a polite knock on my door, not a friendly neighbor chat, but an official-looking letter on HOA letterhead with my name typed formally across the front. I opened it while standing at my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, and felt my blood pressure rise with each word. The letter stated that I was in violation of Section 7.3.2 of the Meadowbrook Estates Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, which allegedly prohibited all signage visible from the street except for approved real estate signs. I had 72 hours to remove the political sign or face a fine of $100 per day until compliance was achieved. The letter was signed by Sharon Patterson, HOA president, in what looked like an unnecessarily aggressive signature with way too much flourish. I set my coffee down harder than I meant to. The thing is, I'd actually read through the CC and Articles when I bought the house. I'm that kind of person, the one who reads terms and conditions, who actually goes through legal documents, and I didn't remember any blanket prohibition on political signs. Sure, there were restrictions on sign size, placement, and duration, but nothing that would make my modest campaign sign illegal. I pulled out my copy of the CC and Articles from my filing cabinet and started reading through Section 7. The language was dense and full of legalese, but as I suspected, there was nothing that outright banned political signs. There were general provisions about maintaining neighborhood aesthetics, restrictions on commercial signage, and requirements that temporary signs be removed within certain timeframes after their purpose expired. But political signs during an election season? Nothing. I decided to respond professionally. I drafted an email to the HOA board, citing the specific language in the CC and Articles, and politely explained that my sign appeared to be in full compliance with the actual restrictions. I included photographs of the sign showing its modest size and neat placement. I kept my tone respectful but firm. I sent it Thursday afternoon and figured that would be the end of it. Maybe Sharon had made an honest mistake. Maybe she'd apologize and we'd all move on. Friday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman in her early 50s with an asymmetrical blonde bob that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager." She wore yoga pants despite clearly never having done yoga in them, and carried a binder that she clutched like it contained state secrets. Xavier. She asked, though she obviously knew who I was. That's me. I'm Sharon Patterson, HOA president. We need to discuss your blatant disregard for community standards. I blinked. Blatant disregard. I sent you an email explaining that my sign appears to comply with the CC and Articles. Your interpretation is incorrect. She opened her binder and pulled out a highlighted copy of something. Section 7.3.2 clearly states that unauthorized signage is prohibited. It says unauthorized commercial signage and signs that create visual blight. A standard political sign during an election season doesn't qualify. Sharon's face was already flushing red. I've been president of this HOA for 6 years, Mr. Xavier. I think I understand our governing documents better than you do. Then help me understand, I said, keeping my voice level. Can you show me specifically where political signs are banned? The intent of the CC and Articles is to maintain property values and neighborhood aesthetics. Your sign is an eyesore. It's a professional campaign sign, properly placed, standard size. If you drive through any neighborhood in Scottsdale right now, you'll see dozens just like it. Those neighborhoods clearly have lower standards than Meadowbrook Estates. She snapped her binder shut. You have until Monday at noon to remove that sign or the fines begin. $100 per day. I'm not removing it. It's my right to express political opinions on my own property. Sharon's eyes narrowed. This is HOA property. When you bought your house, you agreed to abide by our rules. If you can't follow simple guidelines, perhaps you should consider whether Meadowbrook Estates is the right community for you. The implied threat wasn't subtle. I felt anger rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'll be consulting with an attorney about this. You do that, Sharon said with a tight smile. You'll find that HOAs have broad authority to enforce community standards. You signed a contract, Mr. Xavier. Contracts have consequences. She turned and walked back to her car, a white Mercedes SUV that probably cost more than my annual salary. I watched her drive away, then looked at my modest campaign sign standing peacefully in the desert landscape. This was insane. I spent the weekend researching HOA law in Arizona. What I found was actually encouraging. Arizona has specific statutes protecting homeowners' rights to display political signs. Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1808 explicitly states that HOAs cannot prohibit political signs, though they can enforce reasonable restrictions on size, number, and placement. My sign was well within any reasonable interpretation of those allowances. Monday morning, I didn't remove the sign. By Monday afternoon, I had another letter in my mailbox informing me that I was now accruing daily fines of $100. The letter also mentioned that continued non-compliance could result in a lien being placed on my property. That was when I decided to call a lawyer. I wasn't going to be bullied by an overzealous HOA president with a power complex. I reached out to a firm in Phoenix that specialized in HOA disputes and property law. The receptionist scheduled me a consultation for Wednesday morning with an attorney named Robert Chen. Tuesday morning brought another surprise. I left for a coffee run around 8 and returned to find Sharon standing in my front yard with a camera, taking photographs of my sign from multiple angles. She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed when I pulled into my driveway. "What are you doing?" I asked, getting out of my car. "Documenting the violation for our records," she said primly. "These will be useful when we pursue legal action. You're on my property. I'm on HOA easement." She gestured vaguely at the area between the sidewalk and street, perfectly within my rights. "That's not how easements work, Sharon." I think you'll find that you're mistaken about a great many things, Mr. Xavier. She took one more photo, then walked to her Mercedes. $200 and counting. I do hope you have deep pockets. I watched her drive away, then noticed several of my neighbors watching from their windows. Great. I was becoming the neighborhood pariah over a campaign sign. Wednesday morning, I drove to Phoenix for my consultation with Robert Chen. His office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. Robert himself was in his 40s, sharp dresser, and had the kind of calm confidence that made me feel better immediately. I explained the situation, showed him all the correspondence, and gave him copies of the relevant CC and R sections. He listened carefully, taking notes and occasionally nodding. "This is actually pretty straightforward," Robert said when I finished. "Arizona law is very clear on this issue. HOAs cannot prohibit political signs, period. They can impose reasonable restrictions, but those restrictions have to be content neutral and can't effectively ban the signs entirely." That's what I thought when I read the statute. Your HOA president is either ignorant of the law or deliberately ignoring it, Robert continued. Neither is a good look. The fines she's threatening are almost certainly unenforceable. She mentioned putting a lien on my property. Robert frowned. That would be exceptionally stupid on her part. If she places a lien based on fines from an unenforceable restriction, you could sue the HOA for wrongful lien. You'd likely win, and they'd be liable for your legal fees plus damages. So what do? "Let me send them a letter," Robert said. "It'll cite the relevant statute, explain why their restriction is unenforceable, and politely suggest they cease all fine assessments immediately. Most HOAs back down once they receive a letter from an attorney explaining the legal reality. And if they don't, then we go to court, and honestly, Mr. Xavier, it's a case I'd be happy to take. The law is entirely on your side." I hired Robert on the spot. He said he'd have a letter drafted and sent by end of business Thursday. I left his office feeling vindicated and a lot less stressed. Thursday afternoon, I was working from home, in the middle of a video conference with my team, when my doorbell rang. I muted myself, ran downstairs, and opened the door to find a man in his 30s wearing a Meadowbrook Estates polo shirt. "Ethan Xavier?" he asked. "Yes. I'm Derek from HOA Approved Landscaping Services. I'm here to conduct an inspection of your property." I stared at him. "An inspection? For what?" "Routine compliance check. The HOA president requested it. This was retaliation, pure and simple. Sharon was looking for any other violation she could find to harass me with." "Do you have any documentation authorizing this inspection?" Derek looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Patterson called me this morning. She said it was urgent. I'm in the middle of a work meeting. This isn't a good time." "I understand, sir, but I've been told to complete the inspection today." I took a breath. This guy was just doing his job. Fine. Inspect whatever you need to inspect. Just stay out of my way. Derek walked around my property with a clipboard, taking notes. I went back upstairs, rejoined my meeting, and tried to focus on discussing our upcoming product launch while watching through my window as this poor contractor examined my landscaping like he was investigating a crime scene. After my meeting ended, I went back outside. Derek was finishing up. "Find any violations?" I asked, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. "Your landscaping looks fine, Mr. Xavier. Actually better maintained than most properties I inspect. Though, Mrs. Patterson specifically asked me to note the presence of your yard sign in my report." "Of course she did." Derek lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, I've got 3 political signs in my yard, different candidates, but still. This whole thing seems excessive." "Thanks," I said. "I appreciate the honesty." After Derek left, I checked my email and found that Robert had sent me a copy of the letter he'd sent to the HOA board. It was beautiful, professionally worded, but absolutely devastating. He cited Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1808 in detail, referenced relevant case law, and explained in terms a child could understand why their fine structure was legally baseless. He requested written confirmation within 5 business days that all fines would be rescinded and that no further action would be taken regarding my political sign. Friday morning, I received an email from Sharon. Not from her personal address, but from the official HOA board email, which meant this was an official communication. The email informed me that the HOA board would be holding a special meeting on Monday evening to discuss my ongoing violations and hostile attitude toward community standards. I was invited to attend and present my position. The meeting would be at 7 p.m. in the community clubhouse. I forwarded the email to Robert. He called me within an hour. "This is interesting," Robert said. "They're not backing down immediately, which suggests either stubbornness or bad legal advice. Should I attend the meeting?" "Absolutely. I'll come with you if you'd like. Sometimes having an attorney present helps keep things civil and focused." "I'd appreciate that." "One more thing," Robert added. "Start documenting everything. Every interaction with Sharon or the HOA board, every letter, every fine notice. Take photos with timestamps. If this escalates, we want a clear record of their behavior." I spent the weekend documenting everything that had happened so far, organizing emails and letters chronologically. I also did something else. I researched Sharon Patterson. Public records showed she'd been HOA president for 6 years, as she'd mentioned, but before that, there were some interesting details. Several years ago, there had been a dispute with another homeowner that resulted in a lawsuit. The homeowner had won, and the HOA had been forced to pay legal fees. The case involved unauthorized fines for a patio modification that was actually permitted under the CC and Articus. So Sharon had a history of overstepping her authority and costing the HOA money. Interesting. Monday evening arrived. Robert met me at the community clubhouse, a nice facility with a pool, gym, and meeting room. We walked in together, and I immediately felt the hostile atmosphere. Sharon sat at the head of a long table with 4 other board members, all of them looking at me like I'd committed a serious crime. About 15 other residents sat in chairs along the walls, clearly there to watch the show. "Mr. Xavier," Sharon said formally, "thank you for attending, and you've brought your attorney. How dramatic." "Robert Chen," Robert said smoothly, shaking hands with no one since no one offered. "I'm here to help clarify the legal issues at stake." We sat down. Sharon shuffled papers importantly and began speaking. "We're here to address Mr. Xavier's continued violation of our community standards. Despite multiple warnings and accruing fines, he has refused to remove an unauthorized political sign from his property. This demonstrates a clear disregard for the rules that all residents have agreed to follow." One of the other board members, a man in his 60s named Gary, chimed in. "We take community standards very seriously at Meadowbrook Estates. When one resident decides the rules don't apply to them, it undermines everything we've built here." Robert cleared his throat. "May I speak?" Sharon waved her hand dismissively. "If you must. Thank you. I've reviewed the Meadowbrook Estates, CC and Articus thoroughly, and I've found no provision that would prohibit Mr. Xavier's political sign. More importantly, Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1808 explicitly protects homeowners' rights to display political signs. Your HOA's attempted restriction is unenforceable under state law." That statute doesn't override our CC and Artiques, Sharon said quickly. Actually, it does. State law supersedes HOA regulations when they conflict. Your CC and Artiques cannot prohibit what state law explicitly protects. Our attorney has reviewed this matter, Sharon said, though something in her tone made me doubt this was true. He's assured us we're within our rights. Then I'd suggest getting a second opinion, Robert said calmly. Because if you continue to assess fines based on an unenforceable restriction, you're opening the HOA up to significant liability. A woman on the board named Patricia spoke up. But doesn't the HOA have the right to maintain aesthetic standards? That's what everyone agrees to when they buy here. Reasonable aesthetic standards, yes, Robert replied. But those standards can't infringe on constitutionally protected rights or violate state statutes. Political speech is one of the most protected forms of expression in American law. This isn't about free speech, Sharon snapped. This is about property values and neighborhood harmony. Respectfully, Mrs. Patterson, it's absolutely about free speech, and the courts have consistently ruled in favor of protecting that right, even within HOA communities. The meeting devolved into an argument. Other board members kept insisting the HOA had authority. Robert kept calmly citing legal precedent, and Sharon's face kept getting redder. Some of the residents watching began murmuring among themselves. I noticed a few nodding along with what Robert was saying. Finally, Sharon called for a vote. All in favor of continuing fine assessments against Mr. Xavier until he removes the unauthorized signage. 3 hands went up: Sharon, Gary, and a younger woman named Michelle. Patricia abstained. The 5th board member, an older man named Frank, voted against. Motion passes, Sharon announced triumphantly. Mr. Xavier, you now owe $500 in fines with $100 per day continuing to accrue. This is a mistake, Robert said quietly. I strongly advise you to reconsider. Meeting adjourned, Sharon said, standing up and gathering her papers. As Robert and I left the clubhouse, several residents approached me. One woman, probably in her late 40s, introduced herself as Jennifer. I just want you to know not everyone agrees with Sharon, she said. Some of us think this whole thing is ridiculous. I appreciate that, I said. She's been getting worse over the years, an older man added. More controlling. My wife and I got fined last year because our mailbox was the wrong shade of brown. It was brown. Just not the exact brown on her approved list. Another resident joined in. She threatened to fine us because our Halloween decorations were still up on November 2nd. We work. We didn't have time to take them down the literal day after Halloween. I realized Sharon had been building up enemies in the community for a while. I was just the latest target. That night, Robert and I discussed strategy. We have a few options, he explained. We can file for declaratory relief, asking a court to rule that the HOA's restriction is invalid. We can also file for injunctive relief to stop them from assessing further fines. Given the clear statutory protection, I think we'd prevail. How long would that take? A few months, probably. But in the meantime, I'll send another letter, more strongly worded, warning them about the legal consequences of their continued actions. Do it, I said. Tuesday morning, I woke up to find my yard sign missing. Not just removed, but gone. I walked my entire property, checked the street, even asked my next-door neighbor if he'd seen anything. Nothing. I immediately called Robert and then the Scottsdale Police Department. An officer came out around noon, took my statement, and filed a report for theft. I showed him photos proving the sign had been there the night before. To be honest, political signs get stolen pretty frequently, the officer said. Usually teenagers pulling pranks. "I think my HOA president took it," I said, explaining the ongoing dispute. The officer raised his eyebrows. "That would be bold, but without proof or witnesses, there's not much we can do." After he left, I ordered another sign, this time 2 of them, and I set up a security camera facing my front yard. If Sharon or anyone else tried to take my signs again, I'd have video evidence. The new signs arrived Thursday. I put both up, positioned so the security camera had a clear view. I also added a small security camera sign near the mailbox, making it obvious the area was under surveillance. Friday morning brought another letter from Sharon, this time informing me I was in violation of rules regarding security cameras. Apparently, any camera that might capture images of neighboring properties required HOA approval. I laughed out loud when I read it. The pettiness was reaching absurd levels. Robert sent his second letter to the HOA board on Friday afternoon. This one was significantly more aggressive in tone. He laid out a timeline of events, characterized their actions as harassment, mentioned the stolen sign, and stated that we were prepared to file suit if the matter wasn't resolved immediately. He gave them 72 hours to provide written confirmation that all fines were rescinded and that no further action would be taken. The weekend passed quietly. I worked in my yard on Saturday, making a point of waving cheerfully at Sharon when she drove past. She didn't wave back. Monday morning, my phone rang. It was Robert, and he sounded pleased. I just received a call from an attorney representing the HOA board, not Sharon's personal attorney, but one the board apparently hired separately. What did they say? They want to settle. The attorney admitted that, upon reviewing Arizona statute and consulting with legal experts, they realize their position is indefensible. They're prepared to rescind all fines and agree in writing not to pursue the sign issue further. I felt a surge of satisfaction. What about an apology? I can push for one. What kind of apology are you looking for? Written, formal, acknowledging that my sign was always legal and that their actions were inappropriate. I'll see what I can do. Over the next few days, Robert negotiated the terms of the settlement. The HOA's attorney was actually reasonable, which made me wonder how much Sharon knew about these discussions. They agreed to rescind all fines, commit in writing to not interfering with my political sign, and provide a formal apology. The apology part took some back and forth. Sharon apparently fought it hard, but the other board members and their attorney convinced her that a written apology was far preferable to going to court and losing badly. On Thursday afternoon, Robert sent me the final settlement agreement. It was everything we'd asked for. The HOA acknowledged that political signs are protected under Arizona law, admitted their enforcement actions were inappropriate, rescinded all assessed fines, and provided a formal written apology for the distress and inconvenience their actions had caused. The apology was signed by all 5 board members, including Sharon Patterson, though I imagined her signature was written with considerable anger. "This is great," I told Robert on the phone. "Thank you. My pleasure. This was one of the easier cases I've handled, honestly. The law was completely on your side. What about my legal fees? Am I going to be buried in bills? The settlement includes the HOA paying your reasonable attorney fees. You won't owe me anything." That was the cherry on top. Not only had I won, but Sharon's stubborn refusal to listen to reason had cost the HOA money they didn't need to spend. Friday, I received the formal settlement documents via certified mail. Everything was official, signed, and binding. I posted a copy on my refrigerator, right where I could see it every day. But the story didn't end there. The following Tuesday, I received an email from Patricia. the board member who had abstained during that contentious vote. She asked if I'd be willing to meet her for coffee. I was curious, so I agreed. We met at a Starbucks near the neighborhood. Patricia was a mild-mannered woman in her 50s who worked as a teacher. She seemed genuinely distressed about the whole situation. "I wanted to apologize personally," she said. "I should have spoken up more forcefully during that meeting. Sharon can be very intimidating and I didn't want to make waves, but I knew she was wrong." "I appreciate that," I said. "Why didn't you vote against the fines?" "Honestly, I was scared. Sharon has a way of making life difficult for people who oppose her. But after watching what she put you through and seeing how much it cost the HOA in legal fees, I can't stay silent anymore." "What do you mean?" Patricia leaned forward. "There's a group of homeowners who want Sharon removed as president. We've been documenting her overreach for months. Your case was just the most recent example. We're calling for a special election." This was interesting. "How many people are involved?" "About 30 families so far." "We need 50 signatures to trigger a special election according to our bylaws. We're almost there. What can I do to help?" "Just be willing to talk to other homeowners about what happened to you. People need to understand that Sharon's behavior isn't just annoying. It's costing the HOA money and creating legal liability." Over the next few weeks, I spoke with several other residents about my experience. Each conversation revealed more stories of Sharon's overreach. There was the couple who'd been fined for having a pickup truck visible in their driveway because Sharon deemed it unsightly. There was the family threatened with violations because their kid's basketball hoop was 6 inches into the setback. There was the elderly man who'd received a violation notice for having a bench in his front yard that Sharon called visual clutter, even though it was a memorial to his late wife. The stories kept coming, and the anger kept building. Within a month, the petition for a special election had 70 signatures, well over the required 50. Sharon fought the special election, of course. She claimed the petition was invalid due to technicalities, that the signatures weren't properly notarized, that the timing wasn't in accordance with bylaws. But the HOA's attorney, having learned from the previous debacle, advised the board to proceed with the election. The special election was scheduled for early November, conveniently right after the actual political election. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. During the campaign period, Sharon sent out multiple emails defending her tenure, claiming she'd kept property values high and maintained community standards. But her opponents, including Patricia, who was running for president, focused on fiscal responsibility and respecting homeowner rights. I didn't run for any position. I'm not a joiner by nature, and I had no interest in being on the HOA board. But I did volunteer to help Patricia's campaign, creating a simple website that laid out her platform and collected endorsements. Election day arrived. The community clubhouse was packed with residents, far more than usually participated in HOA elections. Sharon looked nervous, which I'd never seen before. She'd always projected such confidence, such certainty in her authority. When the results were announced, it wasn't even close. Patricia won the presidency with 68% of the vote. Gary and Michelle were voted out and replaced by 2 new board members who ran on reform platforms. Frank, the board member who'd voted against fining me, kept his seat easily. Sharon's face as the results were announced was something I'll never forget. The reality that she was being rejected by the community she thought she ruled was clearly devastating to her. After the election, the new board moved quickly to implement changes. They revised the fine structure to make it less punitive and more focused on genuine violations. They created a formal appeal process for homeowners who received violation notices. They committed to consulting with an attorney before taking any enforcement action that might have legal implications. Most importantly, they added a new section to the CC and Articles explicitly acknowledging homeowners' rights under Arizona law, including the right to display political signs, fly flags, and install solar panels regardless of HOA aesthetic preferences. The changes were put to a community vote in December and passed overwhelmingly. Meanwhile, my political sign had done its job. The candidate I supported won their congressional race by a narrow margin. I'd like to think my small contribution to their visibility in the neighborhood helped, even if only slightly. In January, several months after the whole ordeal began, I received a handwritten note in my mailbox. It was from Sharon. The note was brief. "Mr. Xavier, I acted inappropriately in my role as HOA president. I allowed my personal preferences to override my judgment and the law. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you. Sharon Patterson." I stared at the note for a long time. It wasn't the formal apology I'd received as part of the settlement. This was personal, written by hand, with no legal requirement forcing it. Sharon had lost her position, been publicly rebuked by the community, and was probably still processing the humiliation. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to savor the victory. But mostly, I just felt tired. The whole situation had been unnecessary. If Sharon had simply looked up the relevant statute when I first questioned her restriction, none of this would have happened. I folded the note and put it in my file with all the other documentation from the case. Then I went outside and looked at my yard. The political signs were long gone, the election over. My desert landscaping looked great. My house was peaceful. Everything was as it should be. A few days later, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She was pushing a cart full of what looked like supplies for a meeting. "Hey, Ethan," she greeted me warmly. "How are you doing?" "Good. How's the new board working out?" "So much better." We actually discuss things now instead of just rubber stamping whatever Sharon wanted, and we haven't had a single legal threat since taking over. That's great. "I wanted to thank you again," Patricia said. "If you hadn't stood your ground, Sharon might still be running things. Your case was the catalyst that made people realize change was possible. I was just defending my rights, but I'm glad something good came from it. More than you know. We've had 3 other HOAs in Scottsdale contact us asking about our reforms. Apparently, word is spreading that there's a better way to run these organizations." That made me smile. Maybe my experience would help prevent other homeowners from facing similar harassment. As winter turned to spring, life in Meadowbrook Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new HOA board was reasonable and responsive. Property maintenance continued without the atmosphere of fear and over-enforcement that Sharon had created. Neighbors were friendlier, more willing to chat and build community because they weren't worried about being reported for trivial violations. I saw Sharon occasionally, usually from a distance. She'd stopped driving the white Mercedes SUV and now had a more modest sedan. She kept to herself, which was probably for the best. I didn't harbor any ill will toward her, but I wasn't interested in friendship either. In late March, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang one evening and I opened it to find a young couple, probably in their early 30s, standing on my porch. "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said. "My name is Olivia Rodriguez and this is my husband Marcus. We're thinking about buying a house in this neighborhood, and the real estate agent mentioned you were involved in some kind of HOA dispute that led to reforms." I invited them in and told them the whole story. They listened intently, asking questions about the board, the community, and whether they should be concerned about HOA overreach. Honestly, I'd recommend Meadowbrook Estates now. I told them. The new board is reasonable, the community is nice, and the reforms we implemented should prevent the kind of problems I experienced. That's reassuring, Marcus said. We've heard horror stories about HOAs, but we really like the neighborhood. Just read the CC and Articus carefully, I advised. Understand what you're agreeing to, and don't be afraid to push back if something seems unreasonable. They thanked me and left. A few weeks later, I saw a moving truck in front of a house 3 doors down. Olivia and Marcus waved to me from their new front yard. New neighbors, new chapter for the community. As summer approached and a new political season began ramping up, I thought about whether to put up signs again. The issue was settled, my rights were protected, and there was no chance of the HOA bothering me. But did I want to go through the attention again? In the end, I decided to wait. Not because I was afraid or because the HOA had scared me into silence, but because I'd learned that sometimes the battle itself is exhausting, even when you win. I'd proven my point, protected my rights, and helped reform a broken system. That felt like enough. One evening in June, I was watering my desert plants when Patricia walked by with her dog. "Beautiful evening," she called out. "Sure is," I agreed. "Hey, we're having a community barbecue next weekend at the clubhouse. Just a casual thing, no formal meeting or anything. You should come." "I'll think about it." "Please do. It would be nice to see you there." I attended the barbecue, my first real social event in the neighborhood since the whole sign controversy. The atmosphere was relaxed and friendly. People chatted easily, kids played in the pool, and the new board members mingled without any sense of authoritarian oversight. Frank, the board member who'd voted against fining me from the beginning, sought me out. We'd never really talked beyond that one contentious meeting. "I wanted to apologize for not speaking up more forcefully when all that was happening with your sign," he said. "I knew Sharon was wrong, but I didn't want to deal with her wrath. You voted against the fines. That took courage. Not as much as standing alone against the whole board took. You did the right thing, and I'm glad you didn't back down." We talked for a while about his work as a retired civil engineer and my job in tech. It was pleasant, normal conversation between neighbors, the kind of thing that should have been happening all along, instead of legal battles over yard signs. As the evening wore on, and the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, I realized something important. This whole experience had taught me about standing up for principles, about the importance of knowing your rights, and about how systems can change when people refuse to accept injustice. But it had also taught me about community. Not the forced, controlled version Sharon had tried to create through intimidation and excessive rules. Real community, built on mutual respect, reasonable guidelines, and understanding that people have different views and priorities. My political sign was long gone, but the impact of that small act of defiance remained. The reforms we'd implemented would protect future homeowners. The precedent we'd set would make HOA boards think twice before trampling on legal rights. And the community we'd built in the aftermath was stronger than what existed before. I left the barbecue that evening feeling genuinely content with where things had ended up. The journey from that first threatening letter to this peaceful community gathering had been stressful and costly in terms of time and energy. But it had been worth it. As I walked back to my house under the desert stars, I passed the spot where my political sign had stood. The ground was unmarked now, my desert landscaping filling in the space. But I knew what had happened there. I knew that I'd stood my ground, fought for my rights, and won not just a legal victory, but something more meaningful. The next morning, I was having coffee on my back patio when my phone buzzed with an email. It was from Robert Chen, my attorney. He was writing to let me know he'd been contacted by a local news reporter doing a story on HOA reform in Arizona. They wanted to interview me about my experience. I thought about it for a while. Part of me wanted to just let the whole thing fade into memory. But another part recognized that sharing the story might help others in similar situations. If someone else was being bullied by an HOA over protected rights, maybe hearing about my experience would give them courage to fight back. I agreed to the interview. The reporter, a thorough woman named Jessica from a local news station, came to my house the following week. She asked detailed questions about the timeline, the legal strategy, and the community impact. I answered honestly, trying to focus on the broader issues rather than personal grudges. What would you say to other homeowners facing similar situations? Jessica asked toward the end of the interview. I thought carefully before responding. Know your rights. Read your CC and Articus and understand what they actually say versus what someone claims they say. Research state and federal laws that might protect you, and don't be afraid to get professional help. A good attorney can make all the difference. Any regrets about how you handled things? No. I wish it hadn't been necessary, but I don't regret standing up for my rights. If I'd backed down, Sharon would still be president, and the HOA would still be harassing residents over trivial issues. The story aired a few weeks later. A 5-minute segment on the evening news about HOA overreach and the importance of homeowner rights. It was fair and balanced, including comments from HOA industry representatives about the need for reasonable restrictions while also highlighting cases of abuse. I received several calls and emails after the story aired, mostly from other homeowners in Arizona sharing their own HOA horror stories. Some asked for advice, others just wanted to vent. I responded to as many as I could, directing people to resources, and suggesting they consult with attorneys if needed. One email stood out. It was from a man in Temp who was being threatened with fines for installing a solar panel system. His HOA claimed it violated their architectural standards, but Arizona law explicitly protects solar installations. I connected him with Robert Chen, and last I heard, his case was resolved in his favor within a few weeks once the HOA received a strongly worded letter about state law. Helping others gave the whole experience additional meaning. What had started as a personal battle over a campaign sign had become part of a larger movement toward HOA accountability and reform. By late summer, Meadowbrook Estates was thriving under the new board leadership. Property values remained stable, the common areas were well maintained, and the atmosphere was dramatically improved. People actually seemed happy to live there, rather than constantly worried about the next violation notice. Patricia proved to be an excellent HOA president. She was organized, fair-minded, and focused on genuine community needs rather than petty enforcement. Under her leadership, the board implemented a community newsletter, organized social events, and even created a committee to explore adding more amenities to the clubhouse. I ran into Sharon one final time in August at a local coffee shop. We were both waiting for our orders when she noticed me. "Ethan," she said quietly, "Sharon." There was an awkward pause. Then Sharon said, "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how I handled things." Okay. I was wrong. Not just about the legal issues, but about my whole approach. I thought I was protecting the community, maintaining standards, but I was really just imposing my preferences and punishing anyone who disagreed. I didn't know what to say. This was a level of self-awareness I hadn't expected from her. "I've been in therapy," Sharon continued, "trying to understand why I needed that much control. It's been enlightening and painful. I'm glad you're working on it. For what it's worth, The changes Patricia has made are good. The community is better now, I can see that. The barista called my name. I grabbed my coffee, then turned back to Sharon. I hope you find what you're looking for. I genuinely do. She nodded, looking a bit tearful. I left the coffee shop feeling unexpectedly emotional. It's easy to see people like Sharon as villains, but the reality is usually more complicated. She'd been wrong, definitely, but she was also human, struggling with her own issues. That fall, as another political season ramped up, several neighbors put up campaign signs. Patricia called me one evening to ask if I'd be okay with her putting up a sign for a different candidate than I'd supported. Of course, I said, surprised she'd even ask. That's the whole point. Everyone gets to express their political views. I know. I just wanted to make sure there were no hard feelings. Patricia, we fought for the right to put up signs regardless of whose campaign they support. I'd be a hypocrite if I had a problem with you exercising that right. She laughed. You're right. I'm probably being overly cautious given everything that happened. Election day came and went. My candidate lost this time. Patricia's won. The signs came down, life moved on, and the neighborhood remained peaceful. That's how it should be in a democracy. People disagreeing politically but living together as neighbors. As December approached and the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. A year ago, I'd been in the middle of a legal battle over a simple yard sign. Now, I was living in a reformed community with reasonable leadership. I'd helped other homeowners stand up for their rights, and I'd even achieved a kind of reconciliation with Sharon. The experience had changed me in subtle ways. I was more aware of my rights as a homeowner and a citizen. I was less willing to accept unreasonable authority without question. I understood the power of standing firm on principle, even when it's uncomfortable and costly. But I'd also learned about picking battles wisely. Not every slight requires a legal response. Not every disagreement needs to escalate. Sometimes the best response to unreasonable behavior is a calm explanation of why it's wrong, backed by facts and law. On Christmas Eve, I received a card in the mail from Patricia and the HOA board. It was a simple holiday greeting, but inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for helping us build a better community. Your courage made all the difference. I put the card on my mantle, next to photos of family and friends. It felt right to have it there, a reminder of a difficult time that led to positive change. As I write this now, looking back on the entire experience, I'm struck by how a small action, putting up a political sign in my own yard, led to such far-reaching consequences. I never intended to become a champion of homeowner rights or a catalyst for HOA reform. I just wanted to express my political opinion in the most modest, traditional way possible. But sometimes standing up for small rights protects larger principles. Sometimes refusing to back down against unreasonable authority creates space for others to do the same. Sometimes one person's willingness to fight makes a whole community stronger. Would I do it again? Absolutely. The stress, the legal fees that could have been substantial, the conflict with neighbors, all of it was worth it. Because at the end of the day, I proved that homeowners don't have to accept overreach from HOAs. We have rights, and those rights matter. My advice to anyone facing a similar situation is simple. Educate yourself, stand firm on principle, get professional help if needed, and don't let intimidation work. HOAs serve an important function in maintaining communities, but they aren't above the law. When they overstep, homeowners have both the right and the responsibility to push back. The political sign that started everything is long gone now, probably in a landfill somewhere. But the principles it represented, the rights it helped protect, and the reforms it inspired continue to benefit my community. That's a legacy I'm proud of, even if I never sought it. So if you're reading this and facing your own HOA dispute, know that you're not alone. Know that the law often protects you more than HOAs want to admit. Know that standing up can be difficult but worthwhile. And know that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance create the most meaningful change. My name is Xavier. I live in Meadowbrook Estates in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I put up a political sign in my yard. What happened next changed everything, and I wouldn't change a thing.